Math has always been a nemesis for me. I'm not good at it, and this is a whole big piece of my brokenness. But I don't like to try to do stuff I already know I'm not good at. But boy, when numbers appear on a page, like when it's time to do get my stuff together to have our taxes done, I don't do our taxes. I mean that I would be better off going down to the Oklahoma City Zoo and just somehow getting into the orangutan exhibit and asking Moki down there to do it because I'm terrible at math. Uh, I I don't know. I don't have an excuse, but I just am, and I don't have really an interest in getting better at it. So again, you know, it's a weakness, and I'm sure my enemy exploits it. But there is one area of math that I am very intrigued by. I'm terrifically interested in it. I want to be good at it. In fact, I'm highly motivated. Uh, it's here in what we've been looking at in Second Peter chapter 1, where Peter gives a list of things to add to that create in us a godly life. He says, beginning in verse 5, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection. And we talked about those things. We're going to come back to this mutual affection thing one more time. And to mutual affection, love. Now, when we do this kind of math, where simple addition I'm not terrible at, but honestly I'm not very good at. I'm obviously very thankful for smartphones and the fact that I can actually talk numbers into it and it will do the math for me, the addition. Well, anyway, this kind of addition, I'm very interested in adding to my faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and all the way down through adding love to mutual affection, because I can see, and I bet you can too, instantly see as you look at that list someone who has added these things into their life is a very fully orbed follower of Jesus. They have this depth of character and personal depth that make them appealing, attractive. They and maybe the most important thing about that is these things, I think, as I look at this list, these are descriptive of a person who is effective in their life, who is able to address issues of life and figure out, how do I move forward in spite of or because of these things, rather than being stuck because of them. So now, okay, add to godliness mutual affection. I talked about mutual affection in one context last time, and that's context of marriage. When a husband and a wife feel the mutuality of affection, there is health, harmony, growth. A relationship thrives in that environment. Where that is absent, it withers. I consider it a privilege to be able to work with individuals and couples on that level, where my goal is to help them position themselves and arrange their priorities and refine their practices so that they can thrive in their relationships. This this is a huge key for marriages, but it is also a huge key for all human relationships. Just think briefly about your coworkers and your bosses, and just that context, your career life, if I can put it in that category. The people who are more likely to help you move forward in your career path are people from whom and to whom you feel a level of affection. Now, you have to be very, very careful in that context that you realize affection is not romantic necessarily. Of course, it can be, but in that context, you know what? Unless your boss is your spouse, it mustn't be romantic. It has to do with a personal regard. It has to do with the idea that I want that person to succeed. That's one of the primary expressions of affection. Is I want good for you. Well, the people in my career path who I was convinced wanted my good, interestingly, they seemed to pull it off. That I was better when I was connected with them in relationship. I've been blessed that I've rarely encountered people who weren't interested in that. I have had a couple of experiences where people seemed terrifically indifferent. And I had one experience where there was a small group of people who simply did not want me to succeed. Thankfully, I was young enough then that I thought that equaled a reasonable challenge, and I would prove to them, in spite of their strongest efforts, I was going to succeed. Well, anyway, that was a long time ago. Now, today, I realize mutual affection, this mutuality of a desire for the best, of a desire to see the other thrive so that we both have this high esteem and regard for each other. I know that this is one of the largest, most significant, I would say, keys to human relationships. In a church, in a fellowship of Christian believers, in the family of God, boy, doesn't it make sense that this mutual affection ought to be present? Shouldn't it be that this mutual regard marks God's family? The King James Version of the Bible uses, for mutual affection, uses the two words brotherly kindness. Excuse me. And that's a worthy translation. It's a little, probably, we don't use brotherly kindness in our conversation much, and frankly, we probably don't use mutual affection that much either. But at any rate, the concept is, in a family, in a healthy family, the desire is that we would all thrive here. There is, in a healthy family, there is a very, very limited amount of scorekeeping. There's no unnecessary competition. I'm not against competition. I'm not one of these guys that says if a kid shows up, he ought to get a trophy. No, I think winners get trophies and losers get the experience. So you know what? I'm not on that side of the fence. But in a family, if you're part of my family, you deserve my efforts toward kindness, my attitude toward you. It's got to be kind. Mutual affection, brotherly kindness. Now, let's go back to the church setting. Have you ever been either a part of or have visited a church that was in conflict. I don't enjoy those visits. I'm grateful that the conflict, churches in conflict that's been a small part of my experience, but it sets up a very uncomfortable environment. It's very unattractive to outsiders. I think a disingenuous kind of affection will quickly show itself, and it too becomes unattractive to outsiders. It may initially seem more attractive, but over time, and usually it doesn't take that much time for a newcomer or an outsider to discern, something is not right here. And most people who don't have church experience or background won't even know exactly what isn't right, but they will have a sense this isn't right. When God's family is expressing brotherly kindness, mutual affection on a genuine level toward one another, back and forth, where there is this environment of mutuality, the church will become attractive in that culture, in that wherever the setting is. People are first, my thought is, people are first attracted by the music, the melody and the harmony, and then the lyrics. I just think that's true. And so I think a church, and when I say a church, I'm not talking about the big C church. I'm talking about a small C church, the congregation. The congregation that doesn't express brotherly kindness and mutual affection is essentially slicing their own throat. They are just one generation away from extinction because nobody new is going to be interested in that. Now, here's the other aspect of that. If I have this kind of brotherly affection and mutual brotherly kindness and mutual affection only to the people in my congregation, then you become a clique. Now, I asked if you'd ever been in to visit or a part of a conflicted church, and that's not an experience that I want to sign up for generally. The other side of it is I have been in a setting where I was there for quite a long time, but I was always an outsider. They were nice, they weren't unkind, generally, but I never felt like I was part of them, that they had embraced me. You know what? If a church is like that, then it is, I'm going to use a strong word, it is emotionally and spiritually incestuous. If our affection, if our kindness is only among and between us four and no more, that won't, big thing here is we can't even begin to address the Great Commission. Jesus left us as he left earth. See, there are two things. Jesus' great commandment, love each other as I have loved you, and his great commission, go to the whole world with the message, teaching them and baptizing them and teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you. Well, if you have this incestuous view that it's just us and we're kind to each other, but don't get in our way of being kind with each other, you're missing it on both the Great Command and the Great Commission. Some churches, okay, forgive me for being this direct. It's an accusation. But I have, in my experience, I know of churches, and I've been a part of churches, who they needed to put Their motto was in quotes, and then in parentheses they needed to put underneath it, if you're like us, you're gonna like us. Okay. Now, how are you gonna observe the great command and the great commission under that constraint? This brotherly kindness, this mutual love needs to be expressed in a way that it appeals to, it invites the outsider to meet Jesus here and to grow in him with us. Okay, I think I've exhausted my basic ideas about brotherly kindness and mutual affection. So next time, we'll move on to the last thing. I hope I get to connect with you again this way on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.